This is an arrow poison frog. His bright colors are a warning for other animals to stay away. He's a living myth, an animal with a third eye. And this is an alligator from the Florida Everglades. All three of these animals have something in common, as we'll find out today when Discovery examines the exciting world of reptiles and amphibians. Discovery 70, the award-winning program for young people with Bill Owen. Hi, and welcome to Discovery. Today we've come to the Reptile House at New York's Bronx Zoo for a first-hand look at a group of animals that are equally at home, on land or in the water. Millions of years ago, when the first prehistoric sea creatures ventured up from the water, it was necessary for them to adapt to their new surroundings by breathing air. Most of the first were probably large dinosaur-like animals. But today, most amphibians are relatively small, less than 3 feet in length. Most are still vitally dependent upon water. Their name, amphibian, comes from a Greek word meaning living a double life. Amphibians must lay their eggs in water, or at least in moisture, and most undergo a change or metamorphosis in the water. Metamorphosis is another Greek word that means a distinct change in form, as from the tadpole to the frog. Born in water, amphibians end up living both on land and in the water. A basic way to remember the difference between reptiles and amphibians is that amphibians have moist skin and no scales, while reptiles have dry, scaly skin. Here at the Bronx Zoo, they've recreated a tropical rainforest in which many amphibians and reptiles live. Of course, in this exhibit, natural enemies have been excluded. But in nature, reptiles and amphibians, and all other animals, must adapt to both their habitat and their enemies. Many animals adapt by camouflage, but brilliant coloration can also be a means of survival. This golden arrow poison frog is poisonous and announces it to all the animals around him by his color. Should an unknowing animal bite him, it will either die or at least never forget what the bright coloration means. Other poisonous amphibians, such as the fire salamanders, have a similar means of survival. Night is the busiest part of the day in the animal world. At least 60% of the world's animals are active by night. Those that come out only at night are nocturnal animals. Animals that are primarily nocturnal have especially large and sensitive eyes. If they ever have to go out in the blinding desert sun, they can close their eyes to slits and avoid damage to their retinas. Their sense of smell is also acute, and they can follow an animal's scent by smell. Some snakes even have special organs that can detect the body heat of their prey. Snakes also feel vibrations on their stomachs. Snakes do not have ears, so these vibrations are especially important in detecting other animals. Amphibians that do not live close to the ground frequently depend upon other means of survival. Instead of bright coloration, which acts as a warning, many have what is called cryptic coloration, or camouflage. Cryptic means hidden, and the tree frogs, which spend most of their time resting on rich green leaves, blend so perfectly they are seldom bothered. The barking tree frog's name actually comes from his mating call, which sounds something like a dog barking. Some tree frogs have remarkable leaping abilities, so they can avoid predators on the ground by leaping from tree to tree. Some are known to be able to jump a distance 17 times their own 1-inch length. They can walk on almost any surface and at any angle. This is because they have pods on their feet that are covered with sticky mucus. When a bird sings, it's either calling a mate, claiming territory, or merely singing for joy. When a frog calls, it's almost exclusively for mating. The male calls, the female comes to him. In spite of the great variety of calls, each female knows the call of her own species. Of all the reptiles and amphibians here at the Bronx Zoo, the alligators and crocodiles continue to be among the most popular with the thousands of people who come here each year. We'll take a first-hand look at some of the alligators and crocodiles here and find out how they've adapted to living in a zoo. And we'll do that in just a minute. One of the most interesting places to observe nocturnal animals in their own environment is in the World of Darkness building at the Bronx Zoo. Dr. Wayne King is the curator of the Department of Herpetology, and he set up these habitat groups for various nocturnal animals. Dr. King, as we all know, there's an interrelationship among animals that live in a particular area, in a swamp, for example. The animals, in other words, depend on one another, don't they?
That's very true. The alligators you see in this exhibit play a very important role in the ecology of the marshes of the southeastern United States. The alligator digs a den, or alligator hole as we call it, where it lives, and this hole may be 6 to 10 feet below the surface of the land in the marsh, so that when the marsh dries up during periods of drought, the water remains in the gator holes. They act as a reservoir then when the rest of the land dries up, and all the fishes and all the amphibians and the invertebrates, the crayfish and such, that live in the marsh can find a refuge in the alligator holes. Then when the water comes up again during the wet season, these animals can repopulate the marsh. The alligator, of course, eats a few of them during this period, but he doesn't eat them all. Since many animals, like the wading birds, the herons and egrets, and many of the mammals, the raccoons and such, depend on fish and amphibians and some invertebrates like crayfish for food, the gator hole actually is a reservoir, the pantry, if you want to call it that, of the marsh during the dry season.
It's a fascinating relationship the animals have. One thing, Dr. King, that's always a bit confusing, how do you tell the difference between an alligator and a crocodile?
Well, if you're in Florida, it's very simple. The American alligator has a rounded snout, while the American crocodile has a pointed snout. But the minute that you get outside the United States, the minute that you get to Africa or Asia, that no longer holds true. There are many broad-snouted crocodiles in other parts of the world. So the simplest way to tell them apart is that when the mouth is closed, the crocodiles have a canine-like tooth in the lower jaw that sticks up and you can see it when the mouth is closed. Where in the alligator, that tooth fits into a notch in the upper jaw and you can't see it when the mouth is closed.
One of the reptiles with which we're all familiar is the turtle. Turtles live all over the world and in almost every kind of climate. Although they're among the most common reptiles, many of them have some very unusual characteristics. When a turtle is underwater, it's usually just holding its breath, like a human swimmer does. But some species of turtles are able to stay underwater for up to 1 year. They can do this because they can breathe without oxygen. Unique among animals, they do not need oxygen to metabolize their blood sugar. Turtle shells are made of their rib cages, and they're the only animals whose arms come from within the rib cage. In order to eat, their necks must be long and are S-shaped. Here again, we see how adaptation has helped them survive. These are Galapagos tortoises. Those from the regions in which plant life is near the ground have standard shape and proportioned turtlenecks. But those from an area in which plant life is higher from the ground than usual have developed shells that are flared upwards at the edge, and their necks are proportionately much longer. They can reach up high to where the food is. Without these adaptations, tortoises from this region would certainly have become extinct. While turtles are quite common, there's one reptile here that's most uncommon. It's called a tuatara, and it's the last surviving three-eyed animal. We'll take a closer look at it in just a minute. Here at the Reptile House, you can find animals from all over the world, from rainforests and tropic swamps to the hottest deserts. This desert represents the area of Arizona and New Mexico, where you'll find rattlesnakes, tiny, harmless lizards, and Gila monsters. The Gila monster, spelled G-I-L-A, but pronounced Gila, is the only venomous American lizard. His venom is not particularly strong, so that he must not only bite, but chew for the poison to seep into the wound. Like most other reptiles living in extremely hot climates, Gila monsters are nocturnal. They find their prey by their sense of smell, like snakes, by flicking out their tongues, which carry scent particles to special organs in their mouths. While amphibians were the first animals to venture onto land from water, reptiles were the first animals to make a full break from the water. Their hard-shelled eggs could survive many dangers on land, and the survival of the species was no longer dependent upon periodic returns to the water to lay eggs. There are few animals as surrounded by legend as snakes. They've been worshipped in ancient cultures such as Egypt, Greece, and India. Slaves from Africa brought snake cults to the New World, where some still survive in the voodoo of Haiti and Brazil. Among the great variety of snakes, only a few are dangerous to man, and then only if threatened. Most snakes move quickly out of the way when in the presence of other larger animals. They'll attack rodents and other small animals, but only for food. Snakes move in two basic ways, in a straight line or in S-shaped movements. In the straight or rectilinear motion, the body moves forward in the skin and pulls the skin up with each movement. In the swifter S-shaped movement, the snake launches its body forward in a series of S-shaped curves, each of which pushes against the natural terrain. Snakes do not have slimy skins, as many people believe, but rather have skins which feel like soft leather. They have no way of controlling their body temperature as mammals do, so they often find hiding places which are cooler than the surrounding air. When people see a snake's tongue flicking, they often believe the snake is ready to bite. Actually, a snake's sense of taste and smell are combined in its tongue, and by flicking its tongue out, it picks up particles in the air that help it to find food and escape enemies. The snake's eyes remain open all of the time because they have no lids. Of all the animals on display here, one of the most unique is the tuatara. It's the last survivor of a group of lizard-like reptiles that lived millions of years ago. Fossils from this period show that many different animals had a third eye. The tuatara escaped extinction, Probably because its natural habitat is in New Zealand, which is geographically isolated from other land masses. The tuatara's third eye lies in the middle of the top of the head and is covered by scales. The third eye cannot see an image, but it can see light and dark, day and night. There's a remnant of a third eye in other reptiles, but it primarily consists of a few nerve cells. In the tuatara, there's a functional retina. There's also a lens-like structure and a non-functional iris, but the retina of the third eye is connected to the brain by nerves. Whether they live in a rainforest, a great swamp, or a desert, the greatly varied species of amphibians and reptiles that we've seen today have all developed unusual characteristics which have ensured their continued existence. All are part of the interrelated world of animals which people can study and enjoy here at the Bronx Zoo and at other zoos across the country. We'll be back in just a minute. We hope you've enjoyed today's program on amphibians and reptiles. If you'd like to find out more about them, here are some books to ask for at your library. Reptiles and Amphibians by Herbert Zim and Hobart Smith. Reptiles as Pets by Paul Villiard. And The Bronx Zoo Book of Wild Animals by William Bridges. Be sure to join us next week for another exciting adventure as Discovery continues to discover the world. Bye-bye.
This has been a Jules Power production in association with ABC News.